Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we are on 7.3 day 4 notes. We're going to be evaluating trig functions. Before we get started, I would just suggest that you pause the video and take a second to fill out this unit circle on your own, and then unpause the video to check your work. Here is the completed unit circle. Please make sure that you take a second to check your work. If you're still having difficulties with memorizing the unit circle, there are many different hints and tricks to help you out. Please make sure that you're reaching out to your teacher for help if you are still struggling. Up next, we're going to be talking about reference angles and the values. So this is where we're going to be using quadrant 1, and r equals 1. So the hypotenuse of each of these reference angles is going to be equal to 1. So first, we're going to talk about reference angle when we're at 30 degrees. So we are going to be looking at this triangle in purple. Okay, now when we have our points on the unit circle, our x, y for our coordinate, that's always cosine is our x. So I'm just going to put this up here. We've got cosine and sine. Okay, so x is root 3 over 2. So if I go back to this reference circle or reference angle down here, my x is going to be root 3 over 2. My y coordinate is 1/2. And of course, my hypotenuse is 1. Okay, then let's move on to our 60-degree reference angle. So that is right here. Okay, so my x coordinate is going to be 1/2. My y coordinate is root 3 over 2, and my hypotenuse is 1. And then last, we have our 45-degree reference angle. Okay, so we'll do that one in red. And this is where both my x and y coordinates are going to be root 2 over 2. And my hypotenuse is 1. Okay, so we're just going to fill out this chart, and this chart will really come in handy. You will memorize it, but until then, make sure that you are continuously flipping back to this table. So when we are in quadrant 1 and we're at pi over 6 or 30 degrees, cosine of theta is going to be root 3 over 2. Sine of theta is 1/2. And then tangent, so tangent is going to be my y over x. So if we write that out, I'll do that over to the side. I would have 1/2 divided by root 3 over 2. Okay, so I can always flip the second one and multiply. So I would end up with 1 over root 3. And then I cannot leave a square root in the denominator. So if I rationalize that, I'm going to end up with root 3 over 3. So tangent of theta is root 3 over 3. Okay, for 45 degrees or at pi over 4, my cosine of theta is going to be root 2 over 2. Sine of theta is root 2 over 2. And then tangent of theta is going to be 1. And then at pi over 3 or at 60 degrees, cosine of theta is 1/2. Sine of theta is root 3 over 2. And then tangent of theta, so sine of theta divided by cosine of theta is going to just give us root 3. We're always going to be drawing our angle in standard position. Then we're going to determine the reference angle. We'll evaluate the trig function for that reference angle, and then we need to just adjust our signs. So remember, we use all students take calculus. All students take calculus. So here we are positive, positive. Here sine is going to be positive. So I've got negative, positive, and it goes cosine and then sine. In the third quadrant, we are negative, negative. So that's when tangent is going to be positive. And then in our fourth quadrant, this is positive, negative, and that's when cosine is positive. Okay, so let's move along to the second page where we are evaluating functions. Our first one is cosine of 150 degrees. I want to follow those 4 steps on the front side of this page. The first step is said to sketch this angle in standard position. So we always start from our origin. So my angle is going to be somewhere right along here at 150 degrees. Next, I want to find my reference angle. So I know that I'm in quadrant 2. So when I'm in quadrant 2, I want to take 180 degrees and subtract 150. That leaves me with 30 degrees. That's my reference angle. So now I can take cosine of 30 degrees, and if you don't know this yet, we just wrote them all down on the front side in that table. So cosine of 30 degrees is equal to root 3 over 2. Okay, now I'm in the second quadrant, and I know that my coordinates are always going to be negative and then positive, and it's cosine then sine. So cosine is negative. So at cosine of 150 degrees, that is equal to negative root 3 over 2. Okay, now we have sine of 150 degrees. Well, I know at 150 degrees, the reference angle is going to be 30. So right away, since we can use what we know from part A, I have sine of 30 degrees. Sine of 30 degrees is equal to 1/2. When I am in the second quadrant, sine is positive, so 1/2 is my answer. C says cosine of negative 150 degrees. So let's go ahead and sketch this one. So negative 150 degrees, I'm going the opposite direction. So when I am in the third quadrant, I want to take the angle that was given to us, so negative 150, and I'm going to add 180. I end up with 30 degrees. So once again, my reference angle is going to be 30. So at cosine of 30 degrees, we know that that's going to be root 3 over 2. When I am in the third quadrant, both my x and y coordinates are going to be negative. So my answer is going to be negative root 3 over 2. And then we have sine of negative 150 degrees. So my reference angle is going to be sine of 30 degrees, and that equals 1/2. But once again, I know based on part C, I am in the third quadrant, and both my x and y are going to be negative. So my answer is negative 1/2. Okay, number 2, this time my reference angle, or the angle that we were given, is 5 pi over 4. So we're at cosine 5 pi over 4. Let's make sure that we sketch this out. So just as a reminder, we have pi over 2. We've got pi, oops, let's go back. Pi is over here. We've got 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi. So I want 5 pi over 4. That is going to be over here. Okay, so when I am in the third quadrant, I am going to be taking the angle that was given to us, which is 5 pi over 4, and I want to subtract out pi, because remember up above in part C, we added 180. So if I subtract out pi, that's the same as 4 pi over 4, and that's going to give me pi over 4. So my reference angle is pi over 4. Okay, so cosine at pi over 4 is equal to root 2 over 2. But again, we have to remember that we are in the third quadrant, so my answer is going to be negative root 2 over 2. I think I need to use a smaller pen here. Okay, sine of 5 pi over 4, I know that's going to be sine. My reference angle is just pi over 4, which again equals root 2 over 2. I am in quadrant 3, so that's going to be negative root 2 over 2. Cosine of negative 5 pi over 4, so let's make sure that we sketch that out. So when we are working with our negatives, now I've got negative pi over 2 down here, negative pi, and negative 3 pi over 2 up top. So I am going to be going here, and I go around the negative direction. Okay, so once again though, my reference angle would just be pi over 4. So we know cosine of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. I am in the second quadrant, and cosine is negative in the second quadrant. And then we have sine of negative 5 pi over 4. So again, that's going to be pi over 2. When I am in the second quadrant, as we know from part C, then sine is positive. So my answer is positive root 2 over 2. Okay, number 3, I have cosine of 17 pi over 6. The first thing I notice is that 17 pi over 6 is more than 1 full revolution. I know that 1 full revolution is 2 pi, or in this case, it would be 12 pi over 6. So what I want to do is take 17 pi over 6, subtract out 12 pi over 6, and I'm left with 5 pi over 6. So I know I'm going around 1 time and then 5 pi over 6 more. So if we sketch this, I know I'm going 1 time around and then pi over 6 is right about here. So my angle looks like that. Find out my reference angle here. So to find out my reference angle, I'm going to be taking pi, which in this case, since we have a denominator of 6, I'm going to say that that's 6 pi over 6, and subtract out 5 pi over 6. And I did that because I'm in quadrant 2, and I'm left with pi over 6. So cosine of pi over 6 is equal to root 3 over 2. I know that I'm in the second quadrant here, so my x-coordinate is negative. So negative 3 pi over 2. Part B, we have sine of 17 pi over 6. So I know the reference angle is going to be pi over 6, and that is equal to 1/2. When I am in the second quadrant, sine is positive, so 1/2 is my answer. In part C, we have tangent at negative 17 pi over 6. So let's go ahead and sketch this one out. So I know I'm going around 1 full time and then negative 5 pi over 6 more. So my angle is going to be right there. So again, the reference angle is going to be, we're going to have tangent of pi over 6. So at pi over 6, I know that sine is equal to 1/2 and cosine is equal to root 3 over 2. Now remember, tangent is sine divided by cosine. So I've got 1/2. Remember, when we divide fractions, we can flip and multiply by the reciprocal. So I end up with 1 over root 3, which is root 3 over 3. Okay, I am talking about tangent. So if we remember, all students take calculus. And since we are in the third quadrant, I know that tangent is going to be positive. So my answer is root 3 over 3. Number 4, we are asked to list 3 angles that have cosine of root 3 over 2. And we want to have this in radians and degrees. So I know that cosine equals root 3 over 2 at pi over 6. That's when cosine is positive. Okay. At 5 pi over 6, cosine is actually negative. At 7 pi over 6, it's negative again, but it becomes positive once we reach 11 pi over 6. So I am going to have to eliminate the 2 in quadrant 2 and 3, since we are looking for cosine of root 3 over 2, which appears to be positive. So if I keep going, and if I just add a full rotation onto that first radian of pi over 6, I would be at 13 pi over 6, and I know it's going to be positive again since I'm back in the first quadrant. So that just means I'm right here, but I went around 1 full time to reach back there. Okay, so at pi over, so those will be my radians, but at pi over 6, we are at 30 degrees. At 11 pi over 6, we're at 330 degrees. Now, 1 full rotation is 360, but I'm adding 30 degrees onto that. So at 13 pi over 6, I will be back at 390 degrees. So those would be 3 angles that have a cosine of root 3 over 2.